Hi, I'm Rachel Ann Goodman, instructor for Cabrillo College's Writing for the Broadcast Media class. Today, my students are going to present a really interesting program about hate speech in America. I hope you'll enjoy it, and please make welcome Cade Pastelnik.
Welcome to Cabrillo Voices. I'm Cade Pastelnik, here with my classmates from the Writing for the Broadcast Media class to discuss the issue of hate speech. In recent months, following the election, there have been a rise in hate crimes across the nation. We've seen everything from defacement of Jewish gravestones, bomb threats on synagogues, mosques burned by arson, to public displays with swastikas on college campuses. This has further complicated the hot debate about drawing the line between free speech and hate speech. Today we'll be discussing recent incidents of aggression regarding those of minority races, religions, and cultures. Even in the liberal bubble of Santa Cruz, hate crimes are plaguing our day-to-day life. We'll talk to Cabrillo students about personal experiences with hate speech and their views on what should and shouldn't be allowed in the First Amendment. We'll also talk with Kristen Fabos, Cabrillo College's Director in Marketing and Communication, about campus policy on hate speech and hate crimes.
Hello, Santa Cruz. Please welcome our panel, Caroline King, Tommy Woodward, and of course, Cade Pastelnik. Caroline, I think you have some very interesting statistics to tell us about hate crime.
This is a steadily growing issue in our nation, and the numbers reveal that. According to a recent article I read published by CNN, a 2013 report from the Federal Bureau of Investigation counted 5,928 incidences, resulting in 7,242 victims. One can only imagine how these recent political environment has affected the statistics. In addition, a study from 2014 by the Southern Poverty Law Center reveals who in fact is perpetrating these crimes. These are the three top ideologies spawning the highest number of active hate groups. First is the KKK with 72 groups, the neo-Nazis with 142 groups, and the White Nationalist Party with 115 hate groups.
Sadly, it seems that a lot of these hate groups have been emboldened these days by what's happening in the news. But we went to campus to speak with students about their opinions and experiences regarding the issues. We were lucky enough to get professional opinions from administrators such as Kristen Fabos, Director of Marketing and Communications, and instructors Michael Pebworth and Sky Gentile, in addition to those students who were brave enough to share their stories. Let's watch the video.
Amendment number 1, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. You've got the notion of free speech. Government shouldn't mess with you for saying unpopular things. But, hate speech is more about people mobilizing or motivating other people to perpetrate illegal activities.
Anything you can think of, I've been picked on for it. Picked on for being a woman. I have a lot of gay friends, so they've been a lot of victims.
I went to Aptos High School, and this guy decided to call me something disrespectful, and I turned around and I called him out, and he broke my phone. So I transferred because I didn't want to deal with that anymore.
We've got some Right to Life groups that come and, have not protests, but they have picture boards and they hand out literature here on campus. And frequently the pictures are quite graphic and jarring, and it upsets quite a few of our students.
There's certainly been times in the classroom where you have really passionate debates. In my 16 years of teaching at Cabrillo, I've never had a student sort of stand up and start throwing racial and ethnic slurs at people. That's something I've never seen. But I've definitely seen times where students have tried to stop somebody else from talking. Just by interrupting them or talking over them, and literally saying stuff like, "You can't say that," that you can't do that. You can't call yourself American and say that.
I was born and raised in Oklahoma, so it's a completely different environment than California. So casual racism is definitely a thing there. Like, for example, when I was 15, I was walking down the street and a group of white guys in a truck just yelled at me, "We like white girls." They didn't think they were allowed to like people of another color. I've been not allowed in people's houses before, like friends. I mean, of course, it's everywhere. There's not a bubble where you can go to get away from hate speech or racist people or ignorance.
We've seen some really vigorous debates about free speech in American history many, many times. Historians always like to say context is everything. So as much as we talk about, oh, history repeats itself, it's not, it's not in a vacuum each time. There's stuff going on around it.
If, someone in political power says a certain type of people is a very certain way and generalizes them in an extreme way, then there will be people who will go after that particular type of person and single them out and try to physically harm them or emotionally harm them.
That's the kind of speech we need to regulate, speech that leads to people getting hurt.
When we normalize hate speech, we're invalidating their experience.
It's been growing for a long time. It's going to take a long time to lean it back over it.
I have a problem that this institution here the power structure does not represent the population we serve. I find that problematic. So at the highest level of our country, I find it hugely problematic.
When you have speech in a classroom that denigrates people who are sitting in that classroom, that's not the exchange of ideas, that's not free speech. That's a group of people being denied their equal opportunity under the 14th Amendment to get an education. The debates we have about free speech now have also been profoundly shaped by the development of the internet. You've got this global digital communication where people can be anonymous. So when people are anonymous, they're much more comfortable popping off. So the internet has been a tremendous boon for people who gleefully engage in hateful rhetoric, because there's no umpire on the internet.
Social media is problematic in that it tunnels you into whatever you like. You get more, and you kind of end up down these little spirals of like-mindedness.
Our board recently, this past Monday night, passed a resolution that is protecting all targeted and vulnerable students. Basically, that states that Cabrillo College as an entity stands up for and welcomes all students to free and open access education. We, as a college, underscore the notion that all students are welcome here.
All of us who have any power within our sphere of influence, I believe, have an obligation to stand with.
Everyone has right to their own opinion, but so it's hard to say that you can't say what you want, but it makes other people upset.
I think that freedom of speech is more important, but you should definitely we shouldn't just let it go if someone says something with hateful intent.
We don't come into this world perceiving difference. It's identified for us.
I think human beings should respect each other more and not be so judgmental towards other people's race or religion.
We're not having conversations with folks that think differently. When you understand that your words matter, you're a little more careful. When you can take a breath and allow your thoughts to kind of come out of silence rather than rebuttal, then you're moving towards understanding.
Those who can go out and vote should vote in a way that shouldn't vote for people who are encouraging hate and discrimination.
So, what really brought this up to us in the first place was what happened at Berkeley a couple weeks ago with Miles Yiannopoulos. He was invited to speak, and then he was not invited to speak because of a lot of blowback from the students there. Protest happened, it got violent, and it's been quite the controversy. So, as a public university, was Berkeley in the wrong to cancel his speech?
I personally think that they were in the right. Not gonna lie, Miles Yiannopoulos is a punk, and we all know what he's trying to do. He's trying to use his rhetoric in a shadow of saying that it's free speech, but really there's violent and brutal rhetoric behind it, and he has an agenda to really suppress certain groups. Like, for example, he was speaking at the University of New Mexico a few weeks prior to Berkeley, and he started talking about Muslims in the Middle East, and his rhetoric really angered a few people who were in the audience. There's two Muslim girls who just finally had enough, and they said, hey, like, that's not okay, like that's hate speech. And his first response was, "You're wearing a turban in America. What is wrong with you? You're wearing a turban and you're wearing a hijab. What is wrong with you?" And he just went on to say that Muslims are just a religion of hate, that wherever they go, they just hate people and they kill people, because Milo Yiannopoulos is gay, and he's like, "Oh, I'm gay in 12 Muslim countries, I'd be killed." And it's just, he's like, "I'm from Britain. Ever since we got immigrants, Muslims have been caused nothing but trouble. Don't listen to us, America." He's just there to rile up people and get people to just chant USA, USA. It's really poisonous and nationalistic.
So you think he's more of a provocateur than someone who's always speaking on the issues?
He's an instigator. Yes, I believe that.
What do you think, Tommy?
Well, personally, I think any type of speech that makes people uncomfortable or feel endangered of themselves is all around wrong. So Berkeley was completely in the right to cancel Milo Yiannopoulos' speech, causing them to be in the wrong. And anyone who causes danger or makes people uncomfortable really shouldn't be doing any public speaking, and it just causes, problems in any sort of contained area of any kind. And anyone who believes that they can say things because of anything, with him being a sexual orientation, thinking that he can just say anything, is completely wrong and totally not cool at all.
Caroline?
Like you said, this is a very controversial issue, and we've experienced this on our campus as well, like mentioned in the video with the pro-life groups. The issue is public institutions must honor free speech, as written in the Constitution, but that entails that it does not disrupt the learning environment. What we experience at Cabrillo with the pro-life groups is them not complying when asked to keep their protest to a certain area. So something like the Milo Yiannopoulos incident didn't arise from that, where you get students really angered to the point of violence. And that is what hate speech is by definition, when someone's words promote or instigate violence. So considering that, then yeah, Milo Yiannopoulos was totally in the wrong because of what his speech led to.
So you think in his case, he wasn't inciting violence by his supporters, but by those who don't like him?
Yeah, so then again, it's more just about, it just stirs the pot in general. It's not really about if the people listening to him support or don't support him. It's how his words affect all that hear them.
And personally, I think he's a troll, and I don't like him, and I wouldn't want him anywhere near Cabrillo. However, Berkeley is a public institution, so they cannot, under the First Amendment, restrict someone from voicing their opinion unless he directly incites violence, which in this case it was the protesters that were anti what he was trying to say that were violent. And I don't think that helps anybody, especially those on the left, when protests should be peaceful, in my opinion.
It's interesting because back in the 1960s, when Berkeley students were really starting to push the boundaries of what it means to have free speech on a public institution, they were rallying to be allowed to have these forums and open discussions about racial segregation, women's rights, lots of issues such as that, where they wanted to invite speakers in a similar manner to come onto their campus. And a lot of them were barred from doing that. So it's kind of interesting to see that this issue has almost come full circle. Well, now they're like trying to stop people from coming and talking about important issues, even though a lot of people argue that anything Milo Yiannopoulos has to say is mostly just useless jargon.
Yeah, I do agree with what you said, Caroline. There is that fine line between hate speech and free speech. And like what Bryce said, sometimes when you let the speaker speak, he or she will look like a fool in front of themselves, thus hurting their movement and helping the resistance. However, I feel like there is a topic difference between the women's movement that you were talking about in Milo Yiannopoulos. The women's movement is for equal rights. It's for helping the community. You look at Milo Yiannopoulos, he believes that the Western culture should be white only. He thinks that there should be no other race that is existing in the West, because that is how the West functions the best, is when it is only white. And that is not an expansion of culture. That's not an expansion of society. That is restricting it to be homogeneous and basically nationalistic. It shouts Nazi rhetoric from the 1940s.
And unfortunately, I think the protests and how they occurred, I think that falls into his hands. I mean, that's what they want. They want to provoke responses, and they want to give evidence to their supporters that, like, you see, look what they do. You know, look, they're violent. So it falls perfectly into what he's trying to do, you know, and which is draw attention to himself. It seems like that's his whole game, you know, and in this case, it worked.
Yeah, when people face a crisis, such as what's going on with our country right now, and what happened in Germany, what happened in Italy with Mussolini, people revert to an unfortunate human tendency. They want to protect their own, like you were saying. He wants only this certain type of people to be here, and they find a scapegoat to blame the problems on, whether they be true problems. I mean, true people who are responsible for those problems, no. But they're going to do it anyway, and they're just going to say what they can say, like you said, to provoke his followers and the people opposed to him.
So it's interesting you're talking about history. So talking about the First Amendment and restrictions of free speech, do you guys think there's ever a good reason for the government to restrict free speech? Like in examples, extreme examples such as in war. What do you think, Cade?
I feel like, again, it really depends on the rhetoric of what is being said. Like, if it is to, hinder a culture or society's rights, then yes, like, it should be, those minority cultures should be protected. However, I feel like in terms of more like political ideologies during wartime, like, for example, if America wants to go to war with a certain country and a vast majority of the people don't want to, they should have the right to speak out against not wanting to go, because that's they're affected by it too. Those are our soldiers going over there and risking their lives. Our tax dollars being spent on the war. They have a right to say those kind of protests. And I think when the government kind of silences that, it's more authoritarian than not.
There's also examples where the tyranny of the majority, when most people want to go to war. Like example in 1918, World War I, vast majority of the country was for going to war with Germany, and hysteria was whipped up. And those in the minority who didn't want to go to war, often they were locked up. Mm-hmm. So sometimes, most of the time, the majority, I shouldn't say most of the time, but the majority can put down the minority when they shouldn't. What do you think, Tommy?
Well, I think that there is already restrictions to the First Amendment already. For example, you can't say the 4-letter F word in a crowded movie theater. And, I personally think that there should be more restrictions, like not using any, words that is particular to anyone's race, gender, or sexual orientation upon any point. Unfortunately, that is not really ideal for most people's beliefs, and so there's no way we can get that consensus on the First Amendment because of that.
So you think there should be severe restrictions on speech?
Not necessarily. I just think that people need a better understanding of what those harmful words can do. But unfortunately, we don't live there. We don't live in those times. People are free to believe what they think. Whether there is restrictions on speech, I mean, you should be able to say what you want, but you should also be able to face the consequences of saying what you want.
Caroline?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now this issue is kind of being spoken about, not just with us, but on a national level, of instances where individuals are perpetrating these kinds of hate crimes. And I think it needs to be thought of not only at the individual level, where there's an obvious lack of morale, but kind of in a systematic level. Why is this happening? Why are so many people adopting this state of mind? Why are these labels being spoken about to divide us as people when in fact we are all human? We're all experiencing the same emotions regarding these issues. We're all affected by them. And I think that it has to come back to that, to the personal implications that these kinds of incidences have. I mean, there is obviously a lot to be said about legislation that is being put in place to try and combat this, but it needs to be brought back home.
Okay. So it seems that some of the people who tend to use these labels are now in the White House, like Steve Bannon, Jeff Sessions, who was deemed too racist to be a judge in Alabama, which is something I think. So do you guys think that the current administration is pushing these ideals, or is, let's say, making it more acceptable to be public with hate speech or hateful ideas?
Yes, absolutely. Steve Bannon, as you mentioned, is a labeled white supremacist. You know, he's friends with David Duke, and when you see them as on top of Trump making these hateful rhetoric, speeches about banning Muslims and that they're all terrorists and stuff, that when as what one of our communication teachers said during the video, when you have the highest form of government in this nation spewing that kind of speech, it's one, preposterous, and also politically speaking, it gives the government a kind of it gives that hateful rhetoric legitimacy. It makes it almost right for these groups to just say what they want and not feel any shame for it, because for the while they've had this kind of closet mentality of like, I can't say it because society doesn't want me to because it's wrong. But now that they have a president who's saying it too, like, oh, I can say it, it's awesome, they think it's the right thing, and it's not. The government needs to set a good example for how to care for all groups of our culture, because we are a melting pot nation.
So in a way, hate came out of the closet.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Tommy?
Well, last weekend, I read this article about this woman who canceled her $6,000 trip to Disney World because of Disney introducing a gay character in their live-action Beauty and the Beast remake. And the fact that she did that was totally a personal matter to her, but the fact that she wrote a 7-page article about how Disney doing that was wrong is pretty prevalent to the current people we have in the government, making her feel like saying these things were completely right and completely on balance, that her point was completely correct in the ways of seeing that. Now, whether or not what she said on this article was completely correct or not is, remains to be seen. Totally don't agree with it, but it's her opinion. But the fact that she was given the bravery to say it was probably due to what people in our White House is currently saying as of this moment in time.
Caroline?
It's also about what the White House isn't saying. With the recent vandalism of the Jewish cemeteries, the bomb threats and stuff, it's taken a lot of time for our leaders to come out and make formal statements that they are in fact against that. And I think that is a major problem as well.
So we're actually almost running out of time. Do you guys have some final thoughts?
Final thoughts. What I believe that we need to do in this country, like we have these hate groups and they're on the rise, is we need to have this form of resistance and this kind of taught in the education system about what is right and what is wrong in terms of hate speech and free speech. And that's kind of where it starts at the root with the children.
Okay.
I just think we need to have all sorts of love and respect for one another in any sort of circumstance. We just, love is gonna love and hate's gonna hate, and we just all need to, have respect for each other and use our filters wisely and all that jazz.
Caroline?
Just more love.
More love. I agree. But the First Amendment does protect the right for people to say terrible things and things we disagree with. And, there wasn't, not too long ago that some of the things that we believe in now would be considered controversial. Yeah. Like, try to talk about gay marriage 100 years ago and you might be shut down for free speech reasons or for controversial reasons. However, things change. So we're about to wrap up now. Thank you, everybody.
We would like to thank our instructor, Rachel Goodman, Santa Cruz Community Television, the Cabrillo College students and faculty involved in making our video, and you for watching this program. We leave you with a final consideration. This issue permeates through our moral, legal, and personal boundaries and challenges us to face the very essence of what is and means to be a melting pot nation. The increasing prevalence of hate speech is an imbalance in our country. However, people, ideas, they both change constantly, and love trumps hate.